Today we are taking a closer look at the Mahlkönig EK Omnia. As I was preparing this review, there was one question I kept coming back to. Is this truly the next generation of the EK43? Or is it more like a modern facelift with a display added and a few extra features built in? Let me start with the conclusion. The Omnia is a completely different grinder from the EK43. The burr size may be the same, but that is where the similarity becomes less important. This video was produced with the support of Dooree Trading, the official importer of Mahlkönig in Korea and a trusted partner of Blackwater Issue, Korea's #1 coffee media platform. Mahlkönig was founded in Hamburg, Germany in 1924. Today, it operates under the Hemro Group and remains one of the most influential coffee grinder brands in the world. In the coffee equipment industry, Mahlkönig is more than a well-known name. For a long time, it has been one of the brands most closely associated with uniform grinding and extraction consistency in specialty coffee. And at the center of that reputation was the EK43. So when we talk about the EK Omnia, I think it is worth looking beyond a simple new product introduction. This grinder gives us a chance to see how Mahlkönig has prepared for the era after the EK43. The EK43 was never just a popular grinder. In specialty coffee, it became a kind of reference point. I still remember the first time I saw an EK43. Its huge size and powerful sound left a very strong impression on me. That was around 2014. At the time, it cost around 4 million Korean won, so the price alone made it feel like a very serious piece of equipment. Then, with baristas such as Matt Perger from Australia leading the way, many top-level competitors at the World Barista Championship showed what the EK43 could do. From there, it quickly spread among baristas around the world. With its 98mm cast steel burrs, massive grinding capacity, and especially the clear and distinctive cup profile it produced in filter coffee, the Mahlkönig EK43 became one of the first names people mentioned when talking about serious grinders. It built deep trust in the specialty coffee world, where people care intensely about flavor. From the moment it appeared, it was already a top-tier grinder. Having an EK43 on the bar almost sent an unspoken message. We serve specialty coffee here. When the EK Omnia first appeared in 2024, the industry reaction naturally split into two camps. Some people called it the successor to the EK43. Others said it was an entirely different product. There is a reason both reactions appeared at the same time. The EK Omnia uses the same 98mm burr platform as the EK43, but its priorities are quite different. The EK43 was built around physical capacity and traditional power. The EK Omnia is built to grind with greater precision, remember settings, and move between a wider range of uses. So why did Mahlkönig choose a new direction when the EK43 was already selling well and had already become an industry icon? The answer is simpler than it may seem. Mahlkönig seems to have started with the EK43, a grinder that was already close to complete in its own category, and then asked what modern grinder operation should look like. If a cafe uses only one coffee all day, there is not much of a problem. But the more seriously a cafe works with coffee, the more often it introduces different coffees throughout the season. It may serve filter coffee and espresso. It may use blends and single origins. It may have several staff members, and those staff members may change frequently. At that point, strong grinding performance alone is no longer enough for a grinder that wants to be called the king of grinders. No matter who uses it, the result needs to be consistent. The grinder needs to return quickly to a previous setting. Variation between users and shifts needs to be reduced. The EK Omnia was created to solve exactly that problem. When you use it, the display feels very clean and intuitive. According to Design Award Materials, the EK Omnia went through more than 24 months of development. Mahlkönig also worked with the German design consulting company Imago Design, repeatedly testing the UX as they completed the user interface. So this is not just a grinder with a nice screen added to it. It was designed around real baristas working in busy environments. It reflects where mistakes happen, where time is lost, and which parts of dialing in can be difficult. Put simply, the idea behind the EK Omnia seems to be this. If the grinder delivers top-tier performance, the usability should also feel top-tier. Let's begin with the hardware. The EK Omnia uses 98mm cast steel burrs. This is the part that most directly carries over the legacy of the EK43. According to Mahlkönig's official materials, the burr life is approximately 6,000 kilograms. It also uses a BLDC motor. I will come back to the motor later. The average grinding capacity is listed at around 11.5 to 13.5 grams per second. There is one important point here. If we look only at grinding capacity, the EK43 is faster. According to the official specifications, the EK43 grinds at around 19 to 21 grams per second. In our own testing as well, the EK43 was slightly ahead. So the EK Omnia is not a more powerful grinder than the EK43. It is more accurate to say that it chooses precision control and operational convenience. You can see that difference just by looking at the hopper. The standard hopper on the EK Omnia is about 250 grams. The standard hopper on the EK43 is much larger. This is more than a simple design or option difference. It is quite symbolic. The EK43 carries the DNA of an industrial grinder, load a large amount of coffee and grind it quickly. The Omnia starts from a different assumption. It is made for smaller batches and more frequent changes between different uses. Of course, the spare parts list includes 1.2 kilogram and 1.8 kilogram hopper options. But the default workflow that the manufacturer presents is clearly different. The Omnia is not a retail bulk grinder. It is a precise, multi-purpose grinder. The exterior has also changed significantly. The EK43 has more of a traditional industrial equipment appearance. The Omnia places an HMI, or human-machine interface, on the front and combines a physical dial with touch controls. Features such as the portafilter holder and magnetic drip tray also raise usability for baristas to a much higher level. At first glance, it may simply look more refined. But this has more to do with working movement than appearance. The parts that baristas touch most often have been redesigned. It was built to make the barista's work easier, and the fact that it also looks good is part of the achievement. When people look at a new grinder, they usually check the burr size, burr material, motor output, and grinding speed first. Of course, all of those matter, but the real difference in the EK Omnia is found in the way it handles grind size. In simple terms, the grinder measures the distance between the burrs in microns and manages the grind setting using that value. Why does this matter? Because the way the EK43 remembered grind settings was very sensory. People would say things like 4.3 or 8.5, and if they wanted to be more specific, they would say something like a little above 4.3 or a little below 8.5. It was almost like saying add just the right amount of salt and pepper. For experienced users, that can work, but when the person changes, that sense changes with them. The Omnia turns that into a detailed numerical value. If a certain coffee worked well around 650 microns, you can return to that same point later. Of course, fine adjustments will always be needed depending on the condition of the coffee, humidity, aging, and extraction setup. But the starting point becomes much clearer. That is a bigger difference than it may sound. Even if you still need to make small adjustments, there is a major difference between starting from a rough guess and starting from the same numerical point. The EK Omnia has 3 grinding modes: classic mode, time mode, and library mode. At first, the names may not sound especially dramatic, but these 3 modes explain much of what the EK Omnia is trying to do. Classic mode is the traditional way of using the grinder. You grind by turning the dial. Of course, the dial does not physically move the burrs directly. When you turn it, the Omnia changes the digital value in microns, and the motor moves the burrs accordingly. This shows how Mahlkönig uses advanced technology while still respecting the habits of existing EK43 users. When a digital machine forces every user into an entirely new way of working, it creates a higher barrier to entry. Some grinders with motorized burr distance system can feel that way. The Omnia keeps the most familiar way of working. So existing EK43 users do not feel as if they have been pulled into a completely different world. it feels more like a familiar grinder has become smarter. That is a clever design choice. Time mode is a time-based grinding setting. This will feel familiar when using the grinder for espresso. You can grind for a selected amount of time and then stop. Of course, this is not weight-based dosing. The PDU, or pre-dosing unit, has been announced as an optional accessory, although it has not yet been released. It is better understood as a supporting feature, and Mahlkönig does not describe it as a complete replacement for weight-based dosing. Still, it should help improve repeatability and reduce the inconvenience of weighing before and after every grind. And then we come to the real heart of the EK Omnia, library mode. When I explain the Omnia, I think library mode alone can explain much of the grinder's philosophy. Library mode can store up to 10 recipes. Each recipe can include notes such as the coffee name and dose. When you recall a saved recipe, the grinder automatically moves the burr distance back to that position. At first, this may sound like a simple convenience feature. In real use, it is much more powerful. The more coffees a cafe uses, the more often it moves between filter and espresso, the more staff it has, and the more shift changes it handles, the more valuable this feature becomes. It reduces the time spent asking, what was the setting again? That kind of moment happens surprisingly often in cafe operation. Otherwise, you end up writing everything down on paper and sticking notes around the bar, even if it does not look very good. To put it more realistically, if one excellent barista remembers everything, there may be no problem. But a cafe cannot run by relying on one excellent barista alone. The busier a cafe becomes, and the more locations it has, the more it needs a system that can be repeated. Compared with the EK43, the Omnia does not necessarily make the coffee taste better. It helps good results become more stable and repeatable, and repeatability has very direct financial value. The EK Omnia combines a physical control ring with a touch interface. This point is also highlighted as a major strength in materials from the IF Design Award and UX Design Awards. The reason this matters is simple. In a busy bar environment, physical controls are often faster and more reliable. For recipe saving, menu navigation, and detailed settings, a digital interface is much more useful. The Omnia keeps both. It brings together tactile control and data, intuitive use, and precision. The UI has generally received positive feedback. Early adopters and influencers have often mentioned that the experience of interacting with the machine feels well designed. Many modern machines come with a lot of functions, but become frustrating the moment you start using them. Some add unnecessary features just to show off technology. Others simply lack intuitive control. The Omnia includes the functions it needs, while keeping the experience clean and easy to understand. One of the biggest differences between the Omnia and the EK43 is software. The Omnia includes a Wi-Fi module, and the manufacturer also refers to software updates and remote access. Update files and web server-based update guides have also been made available. This means the Omnia is no longer simply a machine that grinds coffee. It has become an electronic device that can be managed through software to a certain degree. At this point, what we can confirm is this: the Omnia is clearly a software managed machine, and it has room to develop into a more connected platform in the future. We will have to see how that develops, but I think this alone is meaningful. The idea of updates being introduced into a grinder that evolved from industrial equipment is already a major shift. In the past, grinder care meant replacing burrs, aligning them, cleaning the machine, and that was mostly it. Now there is a user interface, software menus, and updates. The Omnia is no longer just a grinding machine. It has become a digital interface device for coffee. That is why with the Omnia, buying it and using it well matters, but maintenance and support also matter. It is too sophisticated to be treated as just another grinder. In a cafe environment, operating noise matters a lot. That is especially true in smaller spaces, in cafes where customers sit close to the bar, or in quiet, concept-driven cafes. I have to be honest here. Even if we accept that it is part of the character of a high-output AC motor, the high-pitched noise of the EK43 could be quite difficult to listen to as a customer. At times, the grinding sound was loud enough to interrupt conversations between guests. The Omnia emphasizes its BLDC motor and rear cooling design. User feedback from Korea and overseas also commonly describes it as quiet. In our own test, we were also able to confirm that the noise level was sufficiently low. The difference in noise goes beyond simply being a little easier on the ears. If long-term use creates less heat, reduces fan noise, and lowers fatigue in the workspace, the barista ends up feeling much less tired. A cafe has more auditory fatigue than many people realize. There is the sound of the espresso machine, grinders, ice machine, orders, music, and conversations all mixed together. Most cafes are not designed with serious sound absorption in mind. So when one of the loudest pieces of equipment becomes quieter, the benefit is direct and easy to feel. This is hard to understand from specification numbers alone, but in an actual cafe, the difference can be significant. According to the official manual and quick guide, the Omnia has a fairly clear maintenance schedule. The spout and hopper should be cleaned daily. The grinding mechanism is recommended to be cleaned every 2 to 5 days. The exterior casing should also be wiped regularly. The manual also notes that the condition of the spout surface and flapper can affect dosing accuracy. A cleaning guide, this detail tells us that the cleaning condition can affect the result, but there is no need to worry too much. Cleaning is very easy. Removing the spout, hopper, and burrs, cleaning them, and putting everything back together does not take long. Now let's move to the most practical question. The EK Omnia is clearly a good grinder, but who is it really for? This is where the difference from the EK43 becomes clear. The EK43 is still a very powerful grinder. It is fast, simple, high capacity, and proven over many years. The Omnia uses the same 98mm burr platform, but adds software and digital control. If we only look at grinding capacity, the EK43 is better. But if you need to move quickly between multiple recipes and maintain precision across staff shifts, the strengths of the Omnia become much more direct. For example, consider a roastery that frequently does bag grinding. If you need to grind coffee for retail orders, cold brew production, or large-scale cupping, the EK43 is a very good choice. When grinding 1 kilogram, the Omnia takes around 74 to 87 seconds. The EK43 takes around 48 to 53 seconds. That creates a difference of roughly 20 to 30 seconds per kilogram. If that work happens several times a day, the accumulated time difference can become quite noticeable. In that kind of environment, the physical speed of the EK43 may be more practical than the software advantages of the Omnia. On the other hand, if a cafe serves both espresso and filter coffee, changes coffees frequently, has multiple staff members, and perhaps operates 2 or 3 locations, the answer becomes clearer. In that kind of environment, the Omnia's library mode and micron-based return function can be very powerful. Noise is another point. For small cafes that focus on high-quality coffee, the Omnia becomes an especially attractive choice. So the fundamental difference between the two grinders can be summed up this way. The EK43 is a grinder that delivers high performance with strong physical presence. The EK Omnia is a precise and quiet grinder that makes good grinding more predictable and repeatable. They share a similar appearance in the same 98mm burr size, but their ideal uses are quite different. Personally, I think the EK43 may gradually move toward the back bar or production area, while the EK Omnia may find its place at the front bar, closer to the customer experience. Let's wrap this up. If you have watched this far, you can probably see that the EK Omnia is much more than an EK43 with a display attached. It takes the same 98mm burr size and adds micron-based burr distance control, recipe saving and automatic return, a hybrid UI, software updates, lower noise, and heat management. Together, these create a completely different way of operating a grinder. Still, it is too early to praise it as a perfect grinder. If you look at overseas reviews and user feedback, the UI, noise level, and workflow are rated highly. At the same time, there are mixed opinions about retention, static, and the shoot area. Because these points can feel different depending on actual conditions, I recommend testing the grinder in person if you are seriously considering a purchase. For many cafes, it can be a very strong solution, but your own environment may not be one of those cases. If the EK43 was the standard retail grinder that covered both front bar and back bar rolls for many years, the EK Omnia adds digital operation on top of that foundation, and that attempt feels quite convincing. For people working in specialty coffee, the features of the EK Omnia will certainly be attractive. But beyond the features themselves, it is also interesting because it shows how Mahlkönig may shape the grinder industry in the years ahead. That concludes our review of the EK Omnia. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I will do my best to answer them.